Hello and welcome to another edition of C Squared Podcast. My name's Curtis. I'm here with my co-hosts, Aaliyah and Holly, and we are here today with veteran journalist Dom Lawson, who writes for Metal Hammer and Blabbermouth and a billion other places, or has at least at one point in one time. And we're very happy to have him today. And we're going to be talking about things like journalism and other forms of writing, and it's going to be quite fun and interesting. So to start off, thank you, Dom.
That's brave.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be fun. It's definitely going to be fun and interesting. So don't worry about that.
So to start off, we're going to kick it off with Aaliyah asking question number one.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to go into the details of asking you who you are and what you do. People can go back and listen to the original episode about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go dive straight into asking about liner notes, because on that last episode, you mentioned liner notes as not being particularly glamorous, but I know they're like a very high value piece of writing. Can you talk a little bit about why you do them, how you get those jobs, and what your favorite set of liner notes to write was?
Wow. Okay. Well, it's one of those things that, you know, the better established you are as a writer and the more contacts you have, the more likely you are to be, you know, for someone to say, oh, we have this reissue coming out, would you write some sleeve notes? I mean, that's basically how it happens, unless you happen to be a writer and you know someone personally who works at a record label anyway, you know. So it started happening for me, I don't know, 2 or 3 years into writing, and it's generally it tends to be reissues and, you know, special editions and box sets, and, you know, because people's new albums don't normally require sleeve notes, you know, although I did some for At the Gates this year, which were brand new for a new album, you know. But really, that's all it is. You know, once you've established the contacts and I suppose demonstrated that you're the kind of writer that can do that kind of stuff, you know, and because you have to usually cram a lot into not very much space. Then, you know, I suppose once people have seen you do a few, then you get to do more. You know, it's just, you know, I don't think there's any formula to it really. I think you just have to be relatively well known for writing for magazines or websites or whatever it is before, you know, it's the name they're after to some degree, but it's also, they want evidence that you can actually write that stuff, because it's not necessarily the same as writing a feature in a magazine. It can be identical, but it's not necessarily. I'm waffling already. It's terrible, isn't it?
Well, yeah, like in some ways it might be like certain pieces in a magazine might be similar to a liner notes, but like it's not the same as a review.
No, exactly. And that, you know, and obviously there's different kinds, you know, so sometimes you're writing, you know, like an essay, which would be like a feature, you know, like I did a big interview in Prog magazine with Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull about 10 years ago. In fact, exactly 10 years ago, when they did the 40th anniversary edition of Aqualung. And they liked my feature in the magazine so much that they just edited it slightly and republished it as the liner notes for the box set that came out. So the things can be adaptable like that, you know, and then I got paid twice for it. So that was, you know, brilliant. I didn't have to do anything, and they just sent me some money and a box set. So obviously that was nice. But at the other end of the scale, you sometimes just have, you know, like, can you write 1,000 words on this album? And there's no quotes from the band aren't available, or they might be dead, or, you know, then the label that's putting it out are not on friendly terms with the band, which is often the case, you know, that they own the rights to the catalogue, so the band don't want anything to do with another cheap cash in, but they still need sleeve notes, and so you have to write something that sounds vaguely authoritative, and, you know, you sort of have to know what I say that I've read plenty of sleeve notes where the people writing them clearly didn't know what they were talking about, but you know, at least give that illusion, I suppose.
So I had a follow-up question, kind of, Dom, if you're willing to nitty gritty details, and if not, just kindly tell me to fuck off in a nice way. What kind of pay scale do you normally get for doing liner notes versus regular writing jobs for those people that are interested in getting into this, if you're willing to say?
I can give you a ballpark.
Sure. Cool.
I mean, realistically, it depends who's asked you to do the sleeve notes. You know, like I've done projects for BMG. You know, I've written sleeve notes for a couple of their box sets, and obviously they pay good money. So, you know, I don't know, 2,000 words, you might get 600, 700 pounds, or more than that, depending on, what the project is. In terms of the more kind of bashing stuff out to go with some reissues that are coming out, and quite often you're doing these things under pressure, by the way. So it's like, we need these in a week, it's that kind of situation. So when that happens, you can sort of ask for a bit more money, because it's not, it's usually open to negotiation, but quite often there's a budget, and that's what they're not really offering. They're kind of saying the budget is this. Will you do the job for this budget? And obviously bigger labels have slightly more money. But I do a lot of I do a lot of bios for various artists at Century Media, for instance. I've done a lot of liner notes for, I don't know, I can't even remember which. Snapper Music. I did a bunch for them. A lot of Wasp reissues and stuff like that. And then if it's multiple, then obviously you're not going to get paid a huge amount for each one, and it's about getting the regular work that's the value, rather than necessarily making a fortune on every one. I mean, I have people I have a good relationship with, and I charge them less because they give me more work. Yeah,
of course, that's usually how it goes. So, so the short answer is it depends upon the size of the band, label, and cool.
I mean, I've written stuff for basically nothing before, because it was people that I know personally that are in bands that I really love.
Of course.
And I knew they didn't have any money, like I'm always doing favors for Shane Embury, put it that way.
Fair enough.
But just like writing little bios and things for him. And it's the same with sleeve notes. If you have a good relationship with a label, and they know that you can turn things around, then it's not necessarily going to make you a fortune, but it's also the kind of the nice feeling you get when you open up the CD and it's your stuff on it,
Fair.
Which I still really enjoy now,
Well, that kind of leads into one other thing I just wanted to go over here. Do you
it's gone quiet.
Can you hear me?
You're gonna have to repeat that, Curtis.
Yeah, honestly.
I'll have to check my Wi-Fi. But just out of curiosity, do you see people still placing a value on the liner notes, even though it's like a lot of people are just doing digital?
I think at the same time that digital has, become the master of everything, really, I think we're now also at a point where everything is getting re-released, and everything is not everything, but most important renowned records will at some stage be remastered, repackaged, and released in a new form to coincide with some anniversary. So although, there probably aren't as many records being released that have sleeve notes, in the old days, a lot of new records had sleeve notes on, like the old jazz records have these incredible, pretentious, unfathomable essays that make absolutely no sense, but they're brilliant, but that is a thing of the past now, really, because everything's released digitally, and no one's going to sit and read 600 words of text. They're not bothered. They just want to, hit shuffle and get the next tune, I've lost my thread again.
It was going perfectly.
It was, yeah.
But just basically, it was like I think you tied that up pretty good.
Yeah, good.
Holly, did you want to do a follow-up? We haven't let you talk even once yet.
Yeah, rude.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know, do you find any differences in the way that you approach things with, say, if they're slightly more of a lesser known band versus one of the big major ones when it comes to writing?
I think, the expectations are different, for one. If you're being paid a lot of money to write something for a box set by a major band, then you kind of, you're under more pressure for sure, and so you do. It's not that I put less effort into something that pays less, but it's, a young band that's coming up, if I wrote them something, it would be partly as a favor, and that's kind of acknowledged. You kind of, that's so they wouldn't expect me to spend a week writing something, and breaking my back over it necessarily. But then, younger bands don't tend to have those kind of things anyway, and I think I'm pretty approachable though. I've been asked to write stuff for totally unknown bands, not liner notes, obviously, because they wouldn't have a reason for them, but a lot of bios and things for people that have no label, have not just have a Bandcamp, and I'm just as into doing that, really. You get satisfaction out of that you don't get from churning out the history of a well-known band again, which is, it has to be done at regular intervals with all the great metal bands and everything else. But, I've written the story of Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and Motorhead and God knows what, all those things 2 or 3 times each, I'm sure, in one form or another. And that's less inspiring, really, than writing about some bunch of idiots that have just formed a band,
Quick follow-up on that, Dom, before Aaliyah takes back over, because I'm being rude again. Does it matter if you don't like the band when you're doing the liner notes or the bio? Just out of curiosity.
I would. It's kind of like when I write for magazines. When at all possible, I would like to write about bands that I like or that I at least approve of on some level. If it depends who's asking. Again, like maybe I said yes to writing a bio for a band about a year ago because the person who asked me was the former manager of a band that I had a really good relationship with, and he remembered me from back in, like 10 years previously, and said, "Oh, we'd really like you to write the bio." And I'd never heard the band, but I said yes because he was a nice guy, And so if I then listen to the band and they're fucking dreadful, they weren't. Luckily, they weren't. But it's perfectly possible that there'll be some fucking awful whiny metalcore band or something. Then I would just politely ask that they don't put my name at the bottom of the bio. It's going out to journalists, really. So it's not like they need to know who wrote it. Most of them aren't going to read it anyway, really. I don't really want to throw my weight behind something I don't like, put it that way. But I'm quite happy to write a bio because that's an exercise in blowing smoke up people's asses. It's not about. There's no critical thinking involved in writing a bio.
The sales piece, basically. You're right.
Yeah. That's what it is, and it's about hammering people with hyperbole. That's what a bio is all about.
Totally. Aaliyah, back over to you.
How do you hammer people with hyperbole without partaking in the press release bingo, though?
Well, yeah, I receive a lot of terrible press releases, and it's usually the underground labels are the worst, but that's because it's very DIY. But you get a lot of badly translated stuff from other languages, for one, but also, every band is legendary and every album is long awaited. I think we talked about this before. It's just, some black. I mean, I like to think I'm fairly well informed about black metal, but the amount of black metal bands that I'm told are legendary in the underground that I've never heard of, you just think, well, they're not, are they? They're legendary in that town, maybe to 7 people, but and it's that. I try and avoid that kind of thing. There's no point in saying this is the greatest band that's ever come out of such and such a place, because chances are, unless it is something truly spectacular, which occasionally does happen, it's another really great metal band. And the best way to sell them is to compare them to other metal bands, really, and to explain what makes them different and makes them stand out. But realistically, you're not dealing with anything earth-shattering 99 times out of 100. And so a bit of hyperbole is essential, because you've got to sound like you're excited about the band. So that's the point. It's fans of the band and journalists don't want to hear you drearily moaning on about how they're quite good and you might want to check this out. Don't worry if not, kind of thing. You want to absolutely hammer it to them. But yes, I mean, there is a limit to hyperbole, because then you end up just joining in the the bad writing circus,
So it's about finding that balance of terminology.
Absolutely, but never back away from hyperbole when you're promoting something. Like it's just a matter of knowing when to rein it in. Usually your first paragraph can be bombastic, and after that, those that are going to read it will read whatever you put, really, if they've read the first paragraph.
So I quick just note to everyone that we got about 15 minutes left on the conversation.
TikTok.
All right.
Yep.
Well, I would like to ask about Dom's iron sandwich.
Oh, right. Okay. God.
Yeah.
All right.
I was watching some of those videos and was just wondering if you could tell us the story behind Dom's Iron Sandwich series and where it started.
Well, it was in the early days of me writing for Metal Hammer, so I don't know, 2007-ish, 2008, I don't know. I can't remember who it was, but somebody at the magazine, someone in editorial asked me if I fancied doing some video reviews because they thought, you know, my blend of sarcasm and despair might go down well with people, you know, and I did a few initially and they were paying me, you know, it was a paid thing. So I kept it up for ages, actually. I did one a week, you know, and did a lot. And I don't know, I've always had a kind of love-hate relationship with it, really, because it's the one thing that people always come up and say to me, oh, I really like your videos, you know, even though I haven't done one for like 5 years, but it seemed to have an impact, you know, and but because I'm a miserable old prick and I don't want to spend my life on the internet, it's not something I'm terribly good at engaging with, you know, like, and so when the money ran out and the company that previously published Metal Hammer went down the toilet, there was no longer any money to pay me to do any videos. So I stopped doing the videos and I haven't really had the opportunity to do them again since, which I think is a shame because I did quite enjoy doing them. But I think even the internet has changed considerably since I was doing them, you know, and it all seems a bit more unpleasant these days. And I'm not sure, you know, like I'm tempted to do it, but at the same time, you know, I'd like to be paid for it. And I don't really want to have to be called an arsehole by millions of people, you know. That's the main thing that puts me off, really, you know.
Well,
fans especially, you know.
Other than the money, what would it take for you to bring it back?
Some form of organisation, because I don't do technology, really. Do you know what I mean? Like I could set up a YouTube channel, but I wouldn't know how to design it to look cool. And oh god, that's my phone. Sorry, why are you phoning me? Go away. That's actually a robocall as well. So. Charming, but yeah, I would just, because I'm totally disorganized, you know, so I can just about hold my life together as it is, but the idea of having to do that, I would need it laid out for me so that I could, you know, if there was any technical stuff I needed to do, I'd have to have help with that, you know, and probably maintaining the site I wouldn't do either, so I'd need some poor sod to you know, to actually maintain it, because once I start going down the rabbit hole of responding to people's comments, I'll be in a straitjacket within about 2 months, I would think.
So was that kind of what happened with? I noticed you did one for Noise Records.
Yeah, I do them occasionally, and those things that is very much, and I'd say this with no shame at all, that is very much being paid to do something. You know, like the record label says, "Could you do an unboxing video?" Metal Hammer say, "Yes, we'll take the unboxing video because it's Dom and whatever." And then they pay me, you know, I can't remember what it was, 100 quid or something to do to do a 10-minute thing, because I guess that's helpful to them promotionally in some way. I don't know. I can't imagine me being sarcastic for 10 minutes and, you know, opening all the records too close to the screen. It's like, you know, that good. But I always liked the kind of completely DIY lo-fi approach. I cannot be bothered to have proper lighting. I can't be bothered to, you know, to point the camera in the, I don't, who cares? It's just my face talking, that'll do, you know.
Yeah.
It's partly laziness, but it's partly fuck off, who cares? Do you know what I mean? Does it matter? You know,
simplicity wins a lot of times.
Yeah, exactly. And it seemed to go down well before. So I would genuinely consider doing it again, but like it's just the prospect of having to set it up and then promote it, and you know, like Metal Hammer, I don't think are in any position to pay me to do something like that. And I don't think there's any interest anyway. So, you know, I could do it independently, but then, like I say, without the assistance, I think it would be a shit show. That's the reality of that, I'm afraid. I'm 49 years old. It's not, you know, the internet's not for me, really.
Well, where did the name come from? Because you mentioned in one video that you were regretting the name.
It was it was something, I think somebody had said something like, oh, it's Dom's metal lunchbox. That was conjured, you know, and I just said, oh, one iron sandwich then, and they went, oh, brilliant, and I went, you know, and so that was it, really, you know. I mean, it doesn't mean anything at all, you know, like it's, I think the idea was it's supposed to be go out at lunchtime, it was something you would watch at lunchtime, you know. But you know, I think it works at any time of the day. Me pissing and whining about Nickelback, I think is and Linkin Park is always entertaining, you know.
Oh yeah.
Only to about, you know, a very niche audience, but still.
Well, I want to quickly ask you, Dom. I know we briefly touched on this in the last podcast, and maybe we talked a little bit further. I'm remembering, but what do you do when you when you do get negative comments, like when you accidentally see them, if I recall correctly, I think you said you don't usually read them, but if you do, what do you do?
I take a deep breath. I think, you know, when I don't know, 10 years ago, I was on Twitter, and I was very active on Twitter, and I was, you know, doing the thing that everybody does on social media. It's just to try and make themselves look cool by being witty and hilarious, you know, and that's what most people do, you know, and not everybody's honest about it, but the social media is kind of about, look at me, I'm brilliant. That's sort of what it's for, you know, or, you know, please hug me because I'm desperately insecure, which is, you know, the flip side, you know. I don't really care what somebody I don't know thinks. I know that that's a very easy thing to say, but I genuinely couldn't give a shit. And my feeling is that I've already stated my opinion. So, you know, if it's a review or if it's a video or if it's, you know, an article, or even if it's just something I say on Instagram, it's not offered up as a starter for a debate. You know, like I'm not a public figure, so I'm not really, you know, I shouldn't be beholden to any particular standard because I've not laid down my opinions in that kind of way. You know, I've not said I'm a radical whatever, you know, or, you know, I'm desperately conservative. You know, like it's fairly obvious where my politics are if you've read enough of my stuff, but it's not, you know, I don't think I hurl my opinions around in such a way that it's obviously diminishing anyone else, you know, and that's what I learned from being on Twitter all that time, is that it doesn't matter how much you don't mean it to be offensive. The old Ricky Gervais defense doesn't really stand up to scrutiny, you know. Oh, it's only a joke. You know, somebody slit their wrists because of your joke. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the possible end, you know. But even everything else, just people feeling like shit because you've had a go at them, I'm just not into it. So that's why I don't read the comments, because I know there'll be people caught, you know, when I reviewed the Striper album and gave it a mediocre review and had to go at them for being Christians, because I personally think Christianity is stupid. I'm sure there was lots. I was told that it really kicked off, and I'm sure there were lots of people, you know, condemning me to hell and, you know, calling me a faggot and God knows what else, you know. But whatever, you know, you wouldn't say it to my face, and if you did say it to my face, I'd knock you out. So it's not, you know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? You know. So I think not reading it is the answer in the first place. You know, if I do see it, I think I can cope. You know. I care what my kids think of me. I don't care what some retard in, you know, Arizona thinks of me, you know. And apologies for using the word retard. I realise that's disableist. I'm sorry. It crept out. What can I say?
All good. But I mean, I think one of the other things too, I know we only got a couple minutes left, and I'm going to shove it back over to Aaliyah, but just as a comment, I think one of the things though is like when someone shares like a negative review that you or someone else does, like a big figure, all it does is it just gets more attention to the review. And I think it actually makes you as a person look better as a result, because it's directing the traffic to the site.
Well, yeah, I think it looks petty, you know, and like I suppose you could argue, oh, the review's petty, but as I know, I only ever give my honest opinions. I don't really care how that's perceived in the same. It's not really the same thing, you know. And I think somebody go, oh, look at this dickhead, and he didn't understand our album. Fuck him, you know. It's like, well, that you just look needy, you know. you just look like you couldn't handle the criticism, you know. And if you put your art out into the public domain, you are going to get criticism, you know. That's the way it works. Sorry.
and you got paid for giving that opinion, so who fucking cares?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've done my job. That's what I mean. Like there isn't a next stage where there's not a right to reply to me directly. Yeah. There is to the magazine. You can say what you like to them, and they can either address it or ignore you. You know, but I've done my bit. That was published by Metal Hammer. That's, you know, you know, my work is done. You know,
exactly.
I only apologise if I didn't make myself clear in the review and it's unclear what I'm trying to say. But hopefully, I don't do that very much. You know?
Totally. So, Aaliyah, we got like 5 minutes left.
Oh, we do. Well, we have time for my last question then.
Yeah,
awesome.
Again, on the last podcast episode, you mentioned that a lot of more new music journalists, younger music journalists don't seem to have a lot of frame of reference for what music journalism really is. And I was wondering if you could give us a list of maybe 3 or 4 journalists that aspiring music journalists should make an effort to read.
Ooh, that's a good question. I suppose it depends which area you're aiming for. If you're in the metal domain, in terms of metal writers, I would say this because he's a really good friend of mine, but Jonathan Seltzer is a really good example of someone who comes from sort of musically from a domain other than mainstream metal. You know, he was sort of a goth fan and a fan of industrial, a fan of, the underground music, and came to metal that way. And yet he's able to write very accessibly about, both underground music and bigger bands. I think, he writes very poetically at times as well. And that's, you definitely have a sense that the writing is crafted and that it exists as a piece of writing rather than just some content. That's my big thing, is writing versus content. I can produce content if you want it, that's fine, and that pays the bills. But people like Jonathan, that's writing, which is obviously has more value. It's just hard to get people to pay for it these days. That's all, So Jonathan for definite. Let me think. John Duran at the Quietus is a genius, basically. Anything he writes is worth reading. And he's one of those writers that it doesn't matter what he writes and doesn't matter what it's about, I want to read it. And that's kind of should be your goal, I think, as a writer, as a writing about music. You're not just filling a hole on a page. You're not just providing content. You want to establish an identity as a writer, and therefore people will go to your reviews first, because they trust you. They trust your opinion, but they also like the way you write, And John Duran's a great example of that. I know he's got a huge fan base of people that love his stuff. He's very sardonic and very, very, he's much smarter than me, but that's not hard really. So that's 2. Let me think of another one. I'm trying to think of somebody younger really, but I don't know any young people. That's the problem. There are a bunch of good writers at Metal Hammer at the moment. There's some great writers at Prog. Prog is definitely a place where a lot of great writers end up, I think. And it may be that the writing age is a little bit older at Prog, perhaps understandably because of the music you're writing about. I really rate Sid Smith. He's a fantastic writer. He wrote I can't remember, is it called In the Court of the Crimson King or In the Court of King Crimson? But the authoritative book on King Crimson was written by Sid Smith. He's a bit of a hero of mine because he writes about jazz and avant-garde music and all that. And I think that's the key to it really, is not just to read other metal writers if you're writing about metal, but read people who write about other kinds of music, mainstream writers. Alexis Petridis at The Guardian he might be a big mainstream writer, but he's the best writer about pop and rock music in the UK without a doubt, and his stuff's consistently entertaining. So he would be another one. There you go, that's 4. That's not bad.
Perfect. Holly, do you have anything? I haven't let you talk either.
Shocking.
I don't want to open a can. I'm trying to think of like a condensed topic because we've only got a few minutes left. I guess I'd be kind of interested to know very briefly sort of how you feel about like the copy paste journalism that's kind of going on at the minute, where it's, sites are literally just they're copying and pasting the press release and that's it, rather than taking the time to review things.
I think it works really well for labels in terms of the promotion. Things effectively go viral because everyone's got it. Everyone's got the same thing and it flies around in very quick. But it's, I don't know, it's a bit joyless, isn't it? Really, and I think most of those websites, with all due respect and good luck to you, etc., but there's no real need for them to exist, because if you hit Google, it's Blabbermouth and it's Brave Words and it's it's Metal Injection and it's not some shitty website. The ones that come to the top are the ones people are reading more. So if you're all publishing the same stuff as them, what's that? It's just more noise, isn't it, really? And it would also be nice if people could be bothered to write their own news stories, That would be, because it's not news, is it? It's content. Again, it's like here's another thing to click on, and it's not, the information's already available, and it's not exclusive. There's nothing about it that's different. I think it's something that teenagers wouldn't clock. They wouldn't care. They just want. It doesn't matter. They just hit the link. But I think older music fans be slightly more discerning. You might want to actually read something. You might want to read 2 stories about the same thing, so you could glean 2 different angles on it. And increasingly that doesn't exist. Which is sad. But I think it does mainly affect the kind of mid to lower levels of bands. The bigger bands, generally, they're a bit more shrewd about sending out things in staggered. Here's a bit of information about the album. Here's a few quotes. Here's a song. Here's a video. That's a bit better, I think. But it's still, yeah. I do find the music industry really joyless a lot of the time, I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ironically, considering what it's supposed to be about.
So I think we have to wrap up now. So thank you very much, Dom, for coming on. We'll have to have you on again because there are some more topics we still do want to go over with you at some point in the new year.
You're very welcome. I would say any time, but you know what I mean.
Totally. So with that,
reason.
with that, Aaliyah, bring us home, please.
With that, I must say, everyone, until next time, make like a bull and throw those horns up.